I recently came across a new report which lists the top 10 countries in Africa for investment, and there's some very interesting ideas for investors. So this is a new report from a group called the Rand Merchant Bank. They're based in South Africa, and I actually came across a couple of different reports, but I'm going to focus on theirs, which is a list of the top 10 friendly countries. We haven't historically talked a little bit about Africa, and I specifically said it's because we have sometimes a hard enough time convincing people to go and invest in Portugal, or go and invest in Mexico, or go and invest in Panama, or go and open a bank account in Malaysia to get their MM2H visa. And for a lot of people, Africa is a step further, but we have been helping a number of clients over the years who are from Africa, and I've seen the high probability, high success rate, high returns on businesses they start. I've seen how they are making money, and so for adventurous investors, there are a lot of opportunities on the continent. Now, if it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. I've been living, investing, and just running my entire life overseas for well over a decade now, and we help as a boutique consultancy 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors who want to legally reduce their taxes, diversify and protect their assets, and increase their freedom and options legally overseas. We also host a conference called Nomad Capitalist Live where we talk about this kind of stuff. And the headline that I saw recently, which make me want to talk about this, is that the European Union, in its goal to get away from Russian oil, whether you like that or not, is turning to Africa. There is more investment coming from the West into Africa. Obviously, there's been investment from China and other players for years. But what I want you to understand is that Africa's metrics are different. You have the benefit where, as I said, you can start higher probability companies. We had someone who started a cement company, for example. I mean, the numbers were just insane. You wouldn't have that in a developed Western market. The competition is obviously far lower. So for younger entrepreneurs, Africa could be a good place to go, as well as if you already have established capital and you're just looking for a place to park it. But the metrics are different. The way you start a business is different. There's obviously more bureaucracy. And so I'm not saying these are the best places in the world to invest, but rather the best places in an up-and-coming continent that still has some challenges, still has some bureaucracy. Obviously, you aren't going to have the benefit of a free residence or citizenship generally by investing in Africa. Not that you would necessarily want many of the African passports in many circumstances. I suppose there are a few different opportunities for citizenship in Africa, but by and large, that's not a perk if you're a nomad capitalist. But South Africa for a long time was number one according to this report, which seems dubious to me. Obviously, there are some countries in the continent that are just uninvestable, but South Africa, with everything that's happened there, and so many people trying to get out, is number one up until recently seems dubious. They're now out of the number one position. What is number one? A country that we've been talking about occasionally over the years, which is Egypt. Why Egypt? Number one, from my perspective as an entrepreneur, you have great talent there at affordable prices. You've got decent English-speaking people, not everybody, but you've got a good English-speaking talent pool. You've got a huge economy. I mean, one of the biggest populations in that region in Africa. You have geographical proximity to the Middle East, to Europe. I mean, just more conveniently geographically located than, let's say Zambia is. Obviously, it's also not as a number of African countries are rather landlocked. So you've got decent geography. You have extremely cheap real estate, which we've talked about before on occasion. You have a currency that's been beaten up. And it was one of, according to this report, the first to bounce back from the pandemic. And so number one country on their list, and any of the other reports that I see where Egypt may not be number one, it was still like in the top 3, the top 5. This is kind of one of the universal selections for where to invest. And if you haven't been to Cairo, it's a very fascinating city. It was a place that was open for much of the last 2 years. People were going there, and that was kind of their place to get away, especially people from Europe and especially from Eastern Europe. A lot of people go to Egypt. But when I was there, I mean, you really see great value real estate. And what I love about Egypt, there actually is a citizenship possibility there for buying certain real estate or putting money in the bank if you want what is definitely a Tier C passport, as we would call it. But you have a population that is growing. You've got a population that continues to move to Cairo, to Alexandria. You have some of the same metrics of, let's say, a Turkey. Certainly you have some of the political uncertainty, but such as investing in Africa, such as investing in that region, you have low prices. And I think some of the metrics to support it, compared to, let's say, you're going to invest in, Bosnia or Moldova, at higher prices, places that you think, oh, okay, well, at least that's in Europe, I could live there. You have historic emigration, whereas, in Egypt, population numbers are rising. Number 2 on the Rand Merchant Bank list was Morocco. They call it one of the more stable economies in North Africa. That's true. Again, you have a well-educated population there. I've known a number of people from Morocco. We've helped a couple of clients from Morocco. benefits of closer ties with Europe. It's been discussed as kind of a way to deliver solar power to Europe. Other things being delivered to Europe. They've got a relationship, with Europe being kind of right at the border and even having part of Spain on their continent. And so that was a country that was widely identified. Obviously a smaller domestic market, but you have the Moroccos and the Tunisias where you also have very affordable lifestyle properties if you want to live on the water, for example. Morocco has been mentioned as a place where you can get very affordable property, potentially an entree to investing there. So I think certainly fewer opportunities in terms of large-scale stuff than Egypt, but nevertheless. Number 4, a very small country. So we'll skip number 3. But number 4, Rwanda has certainly been a country that's been talked about. Very small country, and obviously a country that within your lifetime had a very difficult period. But good governance. I like to think of it almost as the El Salvador of Africa, in a way that they didn't quite gain the international spotlight. There's been a lot of people talking about how Rwanda is the Singapore of Africa, that kind of thing. But in a sense, almost kind of did the same thing as what you're seeing now in El Salvador, not with Bitcoin per se, but just like, hey, we're going to be more of the Singapore model. We're going to be, tough on crime. We're going to, be very tough on certain things, but we're going to be wide open for business, and we're going to do things to try and bring people in. So it's small. The thing that the report says is construction, energy. Those are the kind of things they're looking at in the future. Certainly, I think starting some kind of business there are opportunities, but you've got a smaller domestic market within kind of this East Africa area. If you go to number 9, I think the player in that region where you have greater scale that has emerged as kind of a tech and a fintech center in East Africa is Kenya. And so Kenya has, I think, made a lot of strides. And we've seen, I read things occasionally about how Kenya is the place and there's VC money going, and it's kind of this whole ecosystem in East Africa for creating technologies that are going to be exported throughout Africa and throughout particularly that region. So, Rwanda may be a good place for larger scale stuff. I mean, the same thing like when I go to a country like Montenegro and I meet with people in the government that are like, oh, we were trying to build a port or something, or we're trying to, do some infrastructure project. You can help us build the underwater sea cable or something, and it's a, 2.2 billion euro project or something. Most of us are not going to be doing the 2.2 billion euro project. So I think that maybe a number 9, Kenya, in that East Africa region is perhaps more attractive. And there are lots of small businesses that are cropping up and that are trying to kind of be in this land rush for what is going to be the tech, what's going to be the future of Africa. And a lot of it's happening in Nairobi. Back to number 5, Botswana is a country that I think a lot of people underestimate in southern Africa. That's been relatively well run. It is one of the least indebted countries. They always have been noted for low debt levels, good reserves, lower levels of corruption. And so that helped them these last couple of years get through that. You have more opportunities in that because of those things. It's an English-speaking country, and so Botswana came in at number 5. The one that surprised me, because historically it's kind of been shunned, is Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire. One of the fastest growing countries in Africa. I think this is definitely for someone who's more adventurous and not one that we've really investigated here, but I was surprised to see it on the list at number 8. And so what they talked about was everything is just going crazy there, and it could be an interesting place. Nigeria was the one country that was missing on this particular list, and that was bemoaned by the Nigerian press. That's actually how I came across this initially. Nigeria was also listed at number 1 on some other lists. And so it was interesting because Nigeria, to me, seems to have some systemic issues. And for not entirely similar reasons as South Africa, it seems like, the fact that South Africa is complaining that they're not number 1 on the list anymore speaks to the fact that politicians aren't the ones that drive you to be number 1. I mean, politicians create problems, countries fall off the list. Nigeria, I think, probably suffers from that same kind of thing. So that was the one that wasn't on this particular list. Now, how do you play these opportunities in Africa? My perspective, and this is not investment advice, but my perspective is if you're going to buy some kind of ETF on the U.S. market, some exchange-traded fund or some mutual fund, that's not going to generally give you the exposure. Many, many, many years ago, before I ever really started traveling, I invested in a Middle East and Africa fund, and I think it really hasn't done much since that. I think maybe I made a few bucks on it or broke even, and I just got out of it, and it hasn't really done much at all. Maybe it's even gotten worse since then. Generally speaking, when I work with and I talk to emerging market investors, they're like, you're not going to get a play in your own country that's going to maybe they'll give you a few banks, maybe they'll give you a telecom. I mean, these stock markets in most of these countries are not really that advanced. I mean, there's some of these countries, whether it's Armenia, Cambodia, Kenya. I mean, I think maybe Kenya's more developed, but like, some of these stock markets in Africa, like the other ones mentioned, they might have like 1 listing or 6 listings or 21 listings. I mean, this is hardly the New York Stock Exchange. And so you're going to have a hard time getting some US or European listed fund that's going to capture the real growth opportunities here. The real growth opportunities are on the ground. Real estate can often be expensive in Africa, partially because in some of these areas there have been security concerns, and so the good property where people want to live is naturally more expensive. I think that direct investments, venture capital, being involved in boutique funds, there are kind of some very niche funds that pop up that are on the ground, that are investing in local companies, that are investing in stuff, sometimes on public markets, but sometimes privately as well. So it could also be, what's the opportunity? Expand your company there. In the citizenship space, for example, you have seen a few players who've been expanding operations in some of these countries in Africa. So it could be East Africa. Obviously, South Africa has been a big spot for immigration and financial immigration historically. But you're seeing people popping into West Africa now, whether it's Ghana, whether it's Nigeria. I think there's one company that is in Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire. So if you have a business, how do I play this market? For a company like ours, it's very virtual. That's, I think, probably not the way most of these companies function. Even in South Africa, sometimes it's kind of difficult. Like, where's your office? And so, it's going to be an adaptation to say, I'm going to open, a branch of what we do in Ghana. And so for you, it's probably the same thing. But if you have venture funds, there are people who are, raising money to invest in tech firms. There are some, as I said, very boutique mutual funds. You could potentially go and try and source out real estate deals that are interesting. Or you could start your own thing, or you could make your own investments directly in other companies. I think you're going to see more infrastructure, but that's the nature of these frontier markets, is that there isn't really nearly as many opportunities for you to get in. So if you want us to talk more about this, leave a comment below. This is actually very fascinating to me. I do think that for many people watching, the idea of investing in Cote d'Ivoire, Rwanda is just a step too far. If you want to hear us talking to more people who are on the ground, who have expertise in this market, I'd love to hear from you, and we just may do that.